Okay, so welcome everybody. I thought I'd just begin by reminding us of where we were last time, because people come and go all the time. But what we had tried, this was our grand experiment that we tried to do, which is to have two groups so that we would have topic-centered groups. And so one topic-centered group that people were very much interested in was assessment. And the other topic-centered group was very much interested in coaching. And so we had those two groups. And last session, we met first with the assessment group because there were a small number of us, and we said, let's all just be together. And so we met with the assessment group, and the assessment group kind of chatted. And one of the things that we realized as far as we went, I mean, we had some really great discussions, but we realized that many of us were not really working with students directly. I think Denise was the only one who really had a class of students. And we thought maybe the best thing to do is for us to actually begin to think about assessment from a classroom perspective, which is what we were trying to do, and to maybe just wait and see what kinds of rubrics, what kinds of things we could collect, put resources together, but that probably the discussion around assessment needed more classroom teachers who were actually on the ground doing assessment with kids. With that said, we moved over, and the whole group moved over to coaching. And at that point, we said, you know, we're all very much interested in coaching. And people said, some of my responsibilities are around coaching. I am really an instructional leader who requires that I do some of this work. I really want to know, what are we talking about as an institute when we use the term coaching? And that set us on fire. Like, let's really think about that. And we promised that this session, we would try to both model what we meant by it and also perhaps begin to grab some understanding of what do we really mean by it. And so with that in mind, we all talked. So here's who we all are, just so you know. Juanita, Pat, Michelle, Allison, Art, and I were all in a conversation about, you know, what is it that we are really trying to do when we're thinking about coaching? And then we had a Google Doc, because life is not complete without at least one Google Doc. And we had a Google Doc, and we talked back and forth. And out of that, we thought that this was our first real attempt, that we don't mean for these Monday sessions to be training sessions. So what we're going to do is we're going to lay out some of our initial thinking. And then if people are continuing to be interested in what more we can learn from this, we'll begin to shape something that might be a set of training sessions, better kind of conversations that go deeper with this. But at least for tonight, we're going to try to frame the way we began to think about what we mean by coaching. And one of the first things that we discovered as we talked was maybe coaching is the wrong term. So I'm going to turn it over to Art, who's going to talk with us a little bit about his perspective, but not his, kind of the group's perspective that we've all been talking about and how he kind of sees this. So Art, your turn.
Thank you. I'm going to build on what Bena just said, and that is an invitation to reconsider the term. In other words, coaching itself causes you to think about when you have been coached or when you have coached others. And for example, with Michelle and Juanita and Pat, I know that they have been through cognitive coaching. And so you can't help but think about all of the skills and the purposes and the framework of cognitive coaching as you think of coaching. But that doesn't mean that everybody thinks that way. And we know, for example, that athletes think about coaching from a playground perspective. My son-in-law thinks about coaching because as a high school teacher, he served as a pole vaulting coach. So that's what he thinks about. Also, if you're coming from school where you've had, quote, supervision, then that might mean evaluation. And we don't mean that at all. It might mean that you are trying to get somebody to change what they're doing. And so we're working on them by evaluating, by advising, and that's not what we mean either. And so I'm suggesting that we not use the term coaching, that we drop that from our vocabulary and deplete it from our mind. Now that means that we have to think of something else. And so instead of thinking that we are a coach, we might think that we are, for example, a habits mentor or a personal, well, for example, if you were to go to Nepal, your guide would be called a Sherpa. Well, maybe we need a habits Sherpa. In other words, there are a lot of other ways of expressing what it means to guide, to counsel, to lead. And so we need to think about what might be better called this role that we want to play with another person. Furthermore, I think the habits of mind are powerful enough that we don't need to think about other models of coaching, but rather think about what the habits of mind can do for us in this process. So as we work with other people, do we persist, for example? Do we ask questions? Do we clarify when we don't understand? Do we know how to draw out past information, past successes from people? In other words, the skills of a coach, or should I say a Sherpa, and by the way, in Hawaii, we call it kumu, K-U-M-U, that's called a teacher. So as we think about the role of a teacher, we can call out previous experiences because that is something that is congruent with the habits of mind. So while I'm saying all this, what I'm trying to get at is, I think we need to think anew about what coaching, which I'm not going to use that word again, what we are about for a unique model of the habits of mind. And the reason I'm saying that is because I believe that the habits of mind in and of themselves are powerful enough to become the substance of interaction between two people to improve performance.